Good afternoon and welcome back to Digital Infra Africa, and welcome to this panel discussion entitled Preparing for a Boom in Enterprise Hybrid Cloud Adoption. Before introducing our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to thank Schneider Electric for partnering with us on this session and on Digital Infra Africa this year. Please do visit the Schneider Electric team in the sponsors and meeting areas of the platform, where you can live chat with them or schedule a meeting. Also, don't forget to use the chat box next to the video stream to ask questions to the panel. I'm now very pleased to introduce our moderator, Derek Chiganga, IT analyst at Aquifer Analysis. Derek, over to you.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for the introductions. A warm welcome to our panelists. We've got an interesting panel of experts from all across Africa. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting and engaging discussion on this topic that covers data center and cloud services, particularly in this times of COVID-19, where businesses have been disrupted from a business model perspective, and more companies have started appreciating the importance of cloud and data center services, right? So without wasting too much time from my side, I'm going to kickstart our discussion by posing a question to one of our panelists, right? With the COVID-19 pandemic, right, we've seen a lot of disruption from a business model perspective, right? With more organizations, appreciating, the importance of cloud, as these have helped, most of the companies to achieve business continuity. So instead of cloud having been viewed as a nice to have, now it's actually, a means of survival for most companies. So with that in mind, a question for you, Ranjit, first of all, right? From your side of the world, East Africa, how has the pandemic influenced the appetite for digital services, in particularly cloud and data center services? And how has this translated into demand for connectivity services? And by connectivity services, we're looking at both terrestrial and subsea cable services, if any, right?
Can you hear me? Just a quick sound check.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the question, and thank you, Capacity, for hosting us to be able to talk a little bit about what's going on in our regions. The impact of COVID-19 in general on the internet and digital infrastructure, which is what most of us are involved in, is pretty clear. It is, in many ways, it has enhanced the focus of employers and people in general on health and safety. There's certainly more support than me, myself as somebody that employs other folks. There's far more support today for mobile and remote working than there's ever been. And obviously all of this is using digital services and, cloud and data center. However, in practice, what we are seeing is the following. You see a general economic contraction of 15 to 20% in most countries in Africa, which normally translates to an impact on enterprise. Enterprise is a big part of our market, which of course affects, in general, where customers are spending money and in turn buying services from a digital perspective. With the onset of the pandemic, you've seen people working in offices now working from home. So whilst there is a large take up in home internet services, there's certainly not an increase in business internet connectivity. So I think there is a bit of a balance there, and folks that have portfolios in both tend to work, I guess, well. What we have certainly seen, to the second part of your question, which is around data centers and cloud services, what we are certainly seeing from some of the larger crowd/global internet service providers is there has been quite a lot of investment in the global backbone and certainly connecting to a lot of the African cities in 2020. Not so much in data center services per se, but we feel that will come up in 2021 and 2022. So last year, whilst there has been continued growth for us in general in Africa, or specifically in East Africa, I think you have to nuance that with the fact that a contraction in GDP resulting in less spent by enterprise is certainly having a bit of an effect. And what is maybe even more true is, I think the budgets were pretty much in place for 2020, So a lot of folks ended up having to spend the money. 2021, people are far more cautious. So I would even argue that this year is maybe even a more difficult year from an expansionary perspective. So the terrestrial and subsea demand is also quite interesting. Again, as I mentioned before, terrestrial demand often, for fiber to the home, those sort of services have done extremely well, and probably will continue to do. Wireless mobile internet is a big part of what we do in Africa, and that is, services have improved, provisioning is there. We see, with that, CDNs and others moving closer to where the demand is. So I would say terrestrial services and folks like some of the larger fiber operators in the country have also made very large investments and continue to do so because their business cases are beginning to improve. Subsea demand is a slightly different discussion. It's a 25-year business case. It's difficult to plan subseas around sort of specific events. So because we have 1 billion people on the continent, because we have 10 of the fastest growing GDPs in the world, internet adoption on an average, you've got more than 50% or close to 75% of the population below the age of 30 who continue to live on the internet. There is a very strong business case for subsea demand. You're seeing that with the announcements of 2Africa, one on the west coast, East as well on the east coast, and a few more that have been announced in the meantime. So, network demand, data centers, is all of it goes hand in hand. And I think the leading discussion will always be networks, and then you'll see the data centers sort of shortly following. So, in general, it is all moving forward. It's not entirely clear how quickly, but I would say certainly that the pandemic has certainly pushed the adoption of cloud and moving to co-location in data centers a lot faster. And I think our colleagues on the network side, on the fiber side, are making the investments and helping reduce some of the total cost of ownership models to make some of these migrations more, make the business cases better for everybody in general.
Okay, interesting. I want to pose the same question to you, Dan. How do you see things from your side of the world? I mean, as African data centers, you've got, I'm sure you leverage the connectivity of your holding company. Now it's Liquid Intelligent Technologies, right? From Liquid Telecom, right? They've got so much in terms of fiber outlay across the whole of Africa. They have been developing, expanding also on their data center infrastructure, right? How has this, how is the COVID-19, has it had any impact on, on some of the digital services in terms of demand for those, as well as connectivity from your side?
Indeed, Derek. So maybe just to pick up from what Ranjit has mentioned, the very first thing is it was a very eventful year for all of us. So we started off in March, and rightfully, like every other organization, we had to then activate our business continuity plans. And on us activating our business continuity plans, the very first thing we had to think about was how to remain afloat. How do we survive amidst a pandemic? And we then had to immediately make sure that our staff's safety is actually priority 1, or priority 0. But needless to say, as much as we are a data center operator, and we wanted to make sure that we still have the data center operation running as required every other time, there was a little bit of restrictive movement into our data center facilities across where all the places where we operate. So in Southern Africa, in Eastern Africa, we had to then, offer a little bit of an incentive to our customers and give them a guarantee that we are going to be the custodians of the work that their IT function would have ordinarily been wanting to do in our data center facilities. So we offered free remote and support to just make sure that we were available to support our customers throughout that period. The other thing we also had to do was to look at some of our customers who were hard hit by this pandemic in economic ways. And for those, we also then had to extend some sort of an incentive, and by offering subsidized costs in a subsidized rate in terms of the services that they consume from our data center facilities. This was majorly targeted to medical institutions, non-governmental institutions, academic institutions that we are hosting in our facilities. And at times, we actually had to also get into a renegotiation table with some of the financial service institutions that we host in our facilities, so as to have a way to cushion them from the hard-hitting times that we face throughout the year. So yes, we made sure that we still had the technical teams running the data center each and every other day. But again, ultimately, we made sure that our customers didn't feel a very big pinch in their pockets by renegotiating some of the rates. And at times, we even had services deferred for a certain period, so as to make sure that the impact to them didn't actually lead to them closing shop, but rather staying afloat until such a time that we are through it. But as you rightly asked, we host hyperscale. We host some of the hyperscale cloud service providers in some of our data center facilities. We've got the first public clouds hosted in our facilities in Southern Africa, and we also host some of the edge nodes in our East African data center sites. And for them, they got back to us, rightfully so, that there was a very big consumption of their cloud-based services in the wake of the pandemic. And that was for understandable reasons. We all went back to using virtual digital solutions and platforms for us to transact our businesses by way of internal and external meetings, making sure that we are still interacting with our customers on a daily basis. And that led to heavy consumption of cloud resources. So what we see today is actually the result of these hyperscalers now getting to a point of now wanting to manage that growth in demand and consumption of their resources. So today, as we speak, we are at an advanced stage in terms of our engagement with different hyperscalers, not only in Kenya, in Southern Africa, where it started, where we host our customers. We started with an expansion in our South African sites by growing in Johannesburg and Cape Town. In Nairobi, we are also growing by wanting to build another 10 megawatt data center facility. In Lagos, we just launched this month the start of us building another 10 megawatt data center in Lagos. And of course, to make sure that we are all encompassing across the African continent, we also are building in Egypt and the DRC. And this is basically to make sure that we can offer the same experience across different regions on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. So we've been talking about cloud data centers and the likes, right? I want to pose a question to Theo, right? In terms of business value, right? What can enterprises expect from cloud, right, and data center services, just besides cost savings? Because cost savings, when you mention cloud data centers, yes, you've got more mobility, the ability for employees to access work files remotely, and cost savings. But cost savings, I'm sure that's one of the most interesting to organizations. But besides that, what else would you say are some of the the benefits to organizations through the use of cloud services?
Good question, Derek. I mean, and based on some of the research and our experience in the market, and I think it's a sign of the times as well, a couple of key themes are starting to show itself: agility, business resilience, and continuity. I mean, especially with the emergence of the pandemic as well, it actually forced organizations to change their strategy. Cloud is no more an IT strategy. It's becoming a business strategy. And that type of agility is what clients are looking for. And that's something that we are seeing in the market right now. I mean, you look at the speed with which that global pandemic hit. I mean, it took so many people, so many organizations by surprise. And unfortunately, it left too many enterprises unprepared for the consequences, unprepared for that seismic shift in the way they adapt, in the way they operate. So even core business capabilities needed to change. And one of the benefits that we are seeing and what the clients want to start realizing is more around that agility. It's becoming a lot more crucial. It's a crucial outcome for most, if not all, enterprises as well. Now, when I talk, let's just focus on one of them. I talk about agility. I mean, the agility to innovate, the agility to respond to the changing markets, the agility to to almost expand your organization almost overnight. And so what cloud does give you is it gives you that reach. It gives you that elasticity that many organizations are looking for. And I mean, agility is core, absolutely core. And what we believe is that that sound IT strategy, if it's underpinned by a strong hybrid cloud or multi-cloud strategy, it's absolutely essential in achieving this. And I think it will give organizations a stronger foothold for future growth as well. So the question was, what else apart from cost? Agility, that resilience, and just a stronger foothold for future growth as well.
Interesting.
Hi, Derek.
Yes.
Hi, Derek. I just wanted to add that security is equally, one of the, factors that lead to a lot of our customers migrating to the cloud. And of course, this is basically because we have trusted cloud service providers or partners that, have offered reputable services to the comfort of customers over a very long period. Of course, it doesn't mean that, cloud solutions are not are foolproof in terms of matter security, but there is that proven a performance over a period that we have a lot better secure cloud-based solutions than legacy solutions that have been in place.
I agree.
Thanks, Dan. It's interesting that you mentioned security as one of the benefits of cloud or migrating to the cloud platform, right? But let's go back, a step back. Let's take a step back, right? In terms of the migration process, or in terms of maybe last year when COVID was upon us, right? And businesses had to adapt to the new normal. Were there any unique challenges that you'd say were presented during that process of the transition from working from the office and working remotely? We said security is one of them, and probably connectivity could be another. Maybe I can throw that back at Theo. Would you say, are there any other challenges that were of,
Oh, yes. I think when the pandemic hit and organizations, they had to mobilize very quickly. I mean, their entire workforce was now in lockdown. And there were some very knee-jerk reactions. Let's get the data connectivity. It was an absolute nightmare for CFOs. I mean, again, how do you manage the cost of usage? How do you control the usage? I mean, you could get exorbitant bills coming in month one. Imagine there was somebody updating their Mac or their Windows, and you had gigs and gigs of downloads happening. So I think some of the challenges that we faced, especially with the remote workforce around connectivity and security, was the following. The market demanded enterprise-grade connectivity and enterprise-grade security, but at consumer scale, at consumer pricing as well. I mean, now you for an organization of 1,000 people, literally you had 1,000 branches. And that type of connectivity and the access needed to be deployed at scale. And so there's a couple of things that other challenges. One was just the lack of predictability as far as the cost was concerned. I mean, unless you had uncapped data bundles, I mean, you were going to have very sleepless nights as well around trying to anticipate what that was going to be. Your functions now moved to the homes. I mean, key functions, finance, contact center, agents, all of those different functions that support and run a business. I mean, now what you needed is, well, I need to monitor the experience of those users. And what is the experience like for contact center agents over these unmanaged networks? The visibility became a lot more relevant. I mean, fair enough. I mean, sometimes it's difficult just to get the visualization and performance management on existing campus networks and branch networks as well. Now imagine multiplying that multifold into the home environment. What's the experience like, and how is it affecting productivity? There had to be a balance between home and work solutions as well. How do you separate it? So from a security point of view, how do you separate it? How do you ensure that the experience from connecting into the work via VPN is going to be managed whilst your kids are still able to do their schoolwork? I mean, these were some of the challenges that we were faced with as well. And then, I mean, again, not every user is going to be technology savvy. Some users, they'll go to the office, they'll put their laptop on the desk and it's connected. The security happens in the background. I log in, my machine, the patches are downloaded. But now you have, well, how do we start supporting these users? How do we make it as easy for a user at home to connect without going through multi-layers of manual security? And so some of the challenges and some of the solutions that we incorporated is things like, well, how do you extend your corporate Wi-Fi to the home? So say, for instance, I've got a corporate Wi-Fi, that's what I used at the campus, but it's available at the home and the same level of security applies. So we had to make it easy to use as well. So just to recap some of the challenges, I think it was the unpredictable cost. So we had to get a hold of the cost of the connectivity. It's the security. How do you distribute the security to thousands of locations and make it still easy for users to connect, and the performance management and productivity management as well. Interesting. I think these are some of the things that are always being discussed around in terms of, okay, we've got all those, employees working from home. How do you keep tabs on them in terms of, making sure that, their software is always updated and, they don't visit some of these malicious websites, so that they don't expose company infrastructure, to potential cyber threats. But regards to, we're talking about all this, the boom in cloud services and the like. I want to pose a question to you, Murad, right? Of course, we're talking about a boom and a potential impact on the entire African continent, right? But again, I'm sure African governments, they're always particular about this shift or this improvements in technology, also resulting in an increase in the digital divide, right? From your side, how do you see, or do you believe this booming services is going to lead to better digital inclusion, especially across some of those least developed countries here in Africa?
Well, this is definitely a very great question. And if I have to go with a straightforward answer, definitely we as Schneider, we believe that there is a potential boom in the cloud services happening. First of all, digital transformation is extremely important, not only during a time of crisis. During this pandemic, it has been much more visible that digital transformation is a key. And one of the things that we saw early in the crisis, that the company who were already on the path towards digital innovation are coming out of lockdown ahead. So which means that all the company that has adopted the digital transformation, they are definitely ahead compared to the others that were not. So definitely digitalization is giving agility and adaptive edge, which has helped to push the growth and to continue the plan that are adopted from each and every company. So definitely there is an unprecedented growth that will be enabled by the cloud. Just to give you a sense of the scope, in January last year, in 2020, just before the lockdown, we had 20,000 VPN licenses that was supporting our remote workforce. Today, for a fact, in terms of VPN licenses, we are reaching more than 110,000. We multiply more than 5 times. So definitely there is a clear potential boom behind the cloud services adoption. So the growth in volume and intensity in network traffic was unlike anything we had seen before. Moreover, as people were dealing with considerable change during this pandemic and during, in their personal life, we have seen that the network traffic was increasing at atypical times and not necessarily aligned to the business. So this is definitely what we have seen and what has been highlighted by the pandemic, but this was known. The pandemic was just accelerating this visibility of this potential boom that's going to happen. And maybe we can as well highlight as well the role of the connectivity, but this is most probably something that we will discuss. But connectivity is at the heart, let's say, of this digital transformation, and this is how as well from the telco ecosystem how we can help them to make this cloud happen. And this is one of the let's say the key action to make it happen and to follow up with that growth.
Interesting. From the East African perspective, Ranjit, would you say it is the same story in terms of there won't be this increase in the digital divide with more digital inclusion, or with more digitalization? Sorry.
I would argue that we were already a little bit ahead on that discussion before, specifically East Africa partially and Kenya certainly. In the last 4-5 years, 10 years ago, the big discussion was around smartphones and when people can have smartphones to access the internet. I think that's now completely done. Pretty much everybody has one. The last few years, it has been around connectivity and speeds, but by and large, most people that live in metros and larger cities are on some sort of 4G connection and a decent. What has probably lagged a little bit further than others has been, I think our enterprise sector. I think the consumers have moved on. They have found ways to borrow money online. They found interesting ways to communicate with each other. The telephone companies have definitely lost revenue to data in general, as they've seen more and more people use other services to communicate using their networks. So I would say the digital divide per se is much less. Already 10 years ago, we started paying our utility bills and many of those other things by simply using SMS and using data. So, I think we are certainly much further along on that journey from a consumer perspective. What has been maybe a little bit behind the curve a little bit is the transformation from the average CIO in East Africa thinking about how to redeploy his capex onto a sort of hybrid cloud model. Why they should have infrastructure 500 kilometers away from them in order to get. I think that has been a lot slower than should be there. It has certainly picked up in the last 1 year. The side effect of the pandemic is nobody really wants to see anybody, or nobody needs to see anybody is probably the right way to put it. So as a result of that, you are seeing a shift. And I think the more and more we get into this, the easier it becomes for folks to have it. We have not seen that dramatic move across like what we have, say, for example, seen people using credit cards around the world. It's just not a new normal. That's all you can do now. So similarly, I think some of those services are still a few years away. I think it's also reasonable to mention that, whilst we have data centers and fairly good networks, some of the large cloud platforms are yet to be on East African soil, thereby fulfilling some of the requirements around latency and residency laws, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still gaps, which I say, probably by about 24, 25 will probably be filled. But at this stage, do I feel less of a digital warrior than somebody in New York, or does the average person living? No, certainly not. I think we are all certainly empowered or digitally empowered to not just to interact, but also do work, etc., etc. Most companies in Kenya are allowing their staff to work from home. Government offices, incredibly, as well. And it all works. You get emails are answered. You can show up. Things are organized. You could never get an appointment in many parastatal offices online before. It's all very possible now. So, I would say we are much further along, from a perspective of interaction and things like that. But certainly from an infrastructure move, to a completely digital infrastructure, that is, that still takes a few more years. But I would argue that we've already made substantial progress in the last 5 years or so.
No, thank you very much. I think we've got a question from our audience. I would want to have at least, a word from each and every one of you, but probably if you can just keep your responses short so that everyone gets to answer or to respond. I'll start with Murad. So the question is, I would love to hear what companies such as yours are doing to ensure same or a better performance for enterprises once they migrate their applications to the cloud.
Derek, can you just repeat for me the question?
Okay, I think pretty much what the person is trying to ask is, or what they're trying to understand is that how can you ensure the same or better performance, once I migrate my applications to the cloud compared to having those on-prem? So in other words, if I move my applications to the cloud, am I guaranteed of better or at least the same level of performance as having my applications on-prem?
Yeah, definitely. What is very important as well to bring here as an answer of that is everything related to the protection, to the cybersecurity, which I think is very important to take this into consideration at every level of the, let's say, migration to the cloud. So one of the topics definitely I think needs to be highlighted is from the protection standpoint.
Derek,
yes,
from my end, in terms of what Africa Data Centers is doing to make sure that there is same or better performance, is really the very first thing, bringing that cloud to Africa or very close to the last mile or the end user. So yes, we host some of the public cloud instances in our data centers on the continent. We host some of the Azure. We even host some of the Microsoft Azure instances across our regional data centers, like what we have in Nairobi. And this presents, a lower latency solution to those that can actually want to then migrate their application or services to the cloud, to reduce from having a global hub or international hub to having a hub that is going to be local and hit a server that is actually domiciled within our national borders. And naturally, that reduces latency, which results to better performance and better cost as well. But ultimately as well, it really helps our customers to make sure that they can then comply to certain data protection laws or data governance requirements for that matter.
Okay. And from a Dimension Data perspective?
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, so at Dimension Data, we've spent quite an exorbitant amount of time and effort in creating a comprehensive cloud migration program. And why it's pertinent here is understanding the baseline of an application, understanding the performance traits of an application before and after is absolutely key. I mean, one of the reasons that many organizations move their applications sometimes from the cloud back to on-premise is because they haven't realized the promise or the benefits of it. So what we've done is we start off with baselining, and it's not just about, is your application up or down? It's more around the synthetic monitoring. How long does a transaction take? What is the baseline for the transaction? And what is our target when you want to now move that application to the cloud? I mean, again, a 3 or 4 second delay, you can lose clients. I mean, you don't want an application to start underperforming as well. So the level of monitoring that we do from a synthetic point of view, end-to-end value chain, be it on the network, your middleware, your presentation layer, your database layer, all of those components needs to be tracked, needs to be monitored, needs to be baselined. And when they are migrated, okay, well, what's the performance there? So we are able to do before and after productivity monitoring itself at an application layer and not just from an infrastructure point of view. I think that's key.
No, thank you. And I want to pose the same question to you, Ranjit.
In general, when you have gear on-prem or you have gear in the cloud, the nature of your application makes and who's accessing it is also quite important. But in general, most applications up to 50 milliseconds makes no difference. And if you are working, if you're living in East Africa or for South Africa for that matter, the local regions are now not that far away. Many applications up to 150 milliseconds also doesn't really matter. So from a latency perspective, I would say by and large, there is very little impact. Even if you are using a fairly heavy compute oriented, there is now enough infrastructure, around the world, certainly in Africa as well, where, quite a lot of this input is now cached, that you don't find it. I mean, Netflix is probably an interesting example. Many people use it. I mean, is there a big difference, viewing something in Berlin or viewing something in Nairobi? Not really. The experience is very, very similar. So I would say those days are far, by and large, gone. And especially if we are still talking about a application. If you've got now a very large setup, then you've got to balance some of the cost aspects, versus running your own systems online. And then, of course, the bandwidth connectivity cost. So I would say by and large, the latency discussion has gone away, and it already went away a couple of years ago. And certainly in the future is less relevant.
Okay. Well, one thing I've come to realize is that when it comes to migration, there always seems to be challenges, especially when you're dealing with government in terms of them migrating some of the work files to the cloud, even though some of them they've had maybe digital transformation plans in place for a while, right? So maybe if I can pose a question to you, Murad, what can vendors do to ease the current transformation process, especially within government? So making sure that the process is a bit seamless in terms of the transition from on-prem to the cloud.
Yeah. So definitely from a vendor perspective, we at Schneider we try to let's say put our value in terms of standardization of component or of equipment or subsystem that permits interoperability between equipment from several vendors, right? And from the IoT compliance, basically it has to have a vendor neutral approach, right? And this is how Schneider Electric actually, from the IoT layer of our equipment solution, we try to provide an open communication to any third party to be able to connect to our equipment, and from the IoT compliance. So definitely from the standardization, this is how we can contribute the value from the, let's say, to help, I mean, the government in general to adopt that standardization. The second point is related to the edge data centers, often unnamed facilities close to the point of consumption of data are commonplace in the developed industrial world, responding to the demand for more decentralized data centers infrastructures. This is how as well where we can contribute from the edge data centers perspective. In terms of environmental protection, and many locations we know in Africa are quite let's say I would not say harsh environment, but where the climate conditions are quite sometimes very let's say challenging. And especially in the equatorial center, for example, where we have climatic conditions that are challenged, especially for the efficiency of the cooling, for example. And this is where vendors can definitely contribute to liquid cooling, for example, to new technology when it comes to liquid cooling. We can as well definitely contribute from the microgrid technology, in which the power stored in UPS battery can be used to reduce the power, let's say the power that is required from the main generator supplies, is emerging as an efficient measure in developed region, especially when several data centers collaborate to share their stored energy resources. And this technology and methodology could be particularly useful as solution and unreliable energy supplies in Africa condition.
And same question to you, Theo. What can enterprises, so not enterprises, but vendors, how can they assist government, especially government customers in making sure the transition to the cloud and into the data center environment is as hassle-free as possible?
Yeah, I think on that front, I mean, what governments are looking for is a level of assurance, repeatability, not to sort of pay school fees for migrations as well. And what I mean by that is the following. Is there a proven track record? Is there a proven methodology, solution type blueprints that can be leveraged for the migration of services? So the migration to cloud then becomes a lot more predictable. What we started to introduce at Dimension Data are concepts like solution architecture, but vendor validated, which is a lot more repeatable. So if you need to migrate application workloads or database workloads, there's a proven way, there is a proven sort of infrastructure as code as well that can be used in order to get a consistent outcome. So working closely with the vendors and systems integrator to come up with these vendor validated type approaches, I think will work very well for governments, and it gives them a level of confidence.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe just to wrap up, same question that I'll pose to you, Dan and Ranjit. Skills has always been a key challenge within both the cloud and the data center environments. How do you see that problem or that challenge of limited skills availability being addressed? Do you see that problem currently going away at this stage, or is it still there as a major inhibitor to the development of data centers in Africa? Maybe I'll start with you, Dan.
In my honest view, I don't buy the narrative that there is lack of skills in the data center space in Africa. When we talk skills, I look at it in two ways. That skills can actually be soft skills, where you're actually talking, decision making, having some business acumen, being able to do some sort of negotiations, or being able to make decisions in an organization in a way that is going to help it achieve its objectives. And those are soft skills. Then we also have the hard skills that we probably get or acquire through formal education. And acquiring these skills in specific disciplines, say in electrical, mechanical engineering, and civil engineering, that in itself gives a very strong foundation for one to have an opportunity to serve in the data center space. And we have tons and tons of those with both soft and hard skills. If there's one thing that I will probably single out as probably lacking, is probably a relevant experience specifically in the data center space. So while I say it's lacking, it's not lacking in totality. Ourselves as Africa Data Centers, be it in Southern Africa, we've employed Southern Africans to work in our data center operations. In Kenya, that's the same thing as what we've done. Wherever we go, we try the much we can so that we can make use of locally available skills, because locally available skills also bring into force some other value in terms of having people with a way to go around some of the challenges that could be inherent in terms of our day-to-day operations. So in terms of us gaining this, industry-specific experience, yes, there could be room for that. But I believe in the mantra, hire character and skilled professionals, but give them room so that they can gain specific industry experience. In Africa data centers as well, how do we then make sure that the people we've hired then gain this industry relevant experience by hiring global experts who can come and complement the local knowledge and experience that we've got. So, if I can give maybe just by way of example, our sustainability course as Africa Data Center in terms of energy management, we actually, headhunted one of the celebrated women in tech, Katie Hill from Apple, who champions that course across all Africa Data Center facilities to make sure that we are green and efficient in how we are designing and running our data center facility. But that, again, like I've said, complements the local skills and knowledge that is also very much important in terms of us, also making sure that we are building local skills and also empowering the local markets, so to speak.
Okay, that's fine. It looks like we're running out of time now. I'd really want to thank you, all of you. We could spend the whole day discussing these issues around cloud and data center. Like we've all seen that it's a market that's really fast developing and that we expect to continue developing over the immediate future. So with that, I really want to thank you for your time and for your insights. They've been very interesting and very, very helpful. I'm sure the audience have appreciated all your insights. It's over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks to you, Murad, Dan, and Ranjith, and Derek for your excellent moderation as well, and for all of you for sharing your insights with us today. I'd once again like to thank Schneider Electric for their support of this session and the event. That's all we have for live content today. The agenda starts at 10 a.m. Johannesburg time tomorrow on Wednesday, the 14th of April. In the session on powering the promise of Africa's digital economy. We look forward to seeing you then. I hope you have a nice